Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so I gotta tell someone about this. I've been avoiding thinking about it for months, but it keeps creeping back in. I met someone on Hinge last spring, and it spiraled into the most unsettling, disturbing experience of my life. It's weird because, at first, it seemed almost normal. I had just moved to a new city, knew practically nobody, and was trying to put myself out there. Hinge seemed like the least terrifying option. You know, the dating app for people who want to get off dating apps vibe. I'd had a few okay dates, a couple of duds, the usual stuff. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was quirky. Not in a bad way, exactly. He had a good job, liked hiking, and his prompts were actually funny. One of them was, "My most irrational fear is pigeons planning my demise." Made me laugh. He seemed intelligent, had a good sense of humor, and he was objectively attractive. Tall, dark hair, intense blue eyes. The kind of guy you'd notice in a crowd. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about books, movies, our families, travel. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just trying to get me into bed. We had a lot in common, or at least, that's what I thought at the time. After a week or so of talking online, we decided to meet for coffee. The first date was fine. He was a little intense, maybe, but in a captivating way. He held eye contact a little too long, asked a lot of personal questions, but he was also a great listener and seemed genuinely engaged. We talked for hours, and I left feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this could actually be something. We went on a second date a few days later, then a third. Things started to move quickly. He was always available, always eager to see me. He showered me with compliments, told me I was beautiful, intelligent, and unlike anyone he'd ever met. It felt good, I'm not gonna lie. I was lonely, and he made me feel seen and appreciated. Looking back, the red flags were there, but I was too caught up in the attention to notice. He started talking about the future early on. Marriage, kids, buying a house together. It was a little overwhelming, but I brushed it off as him being enthusiastic. He wanted me to meet his friends and family, and he wanted to meet mine. I hesitated, saying it was too soon, but he was persistent. He said he wanted to integrate me into his life completely. That's when things started to get weird. He began showing up at my apartment unannounced. He said he was just in the neighborhood, or wanted to surprise me. At first, I thought it was sweet, but it quickly became suffocating. I felt like I had no privacy. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, asking what I was doing, who I was with. He wanted to know my every move. He also started getting jealous. If I mentioned a male coworker or a male friend, he'd get visibly angry. He'd grill me about them, accusing me of being interested in other guys. It was exhausting. I tried to reassure him, telling him he had nothing to worry about, but it never seemed to be enough. One night, I went out for drinks with some co-workers after work. I told Liam I was going, but he kept texting me, demanding to know when I'd be home. I ignored his texts, wanting to enjoy my time with my friends. When I finally got back to my apartment, around midnight, he was waiting for me outside. He was furious. He accused me of lying to him, of cheating on him. He yelled at me in the street, attracting the attention of my neighbors. I was mortified. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, squeezing it so hard it hurt. I pulled away, telling him to leave me alone. He finally stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. I went inside, locked the door, and burst into tears. I knew then that something was seriously wrong. This wasn't normal. This wasn't love. This was obsession. I decided to break up with him. The next day, I texted him, telling him it was over. He called me immediately, begging me to reconsider. He apologized for his behavior, promising it would never happen again. He said he loved me, that he couldn't live without me. I stood my ground, telling him it was too late. That's when he snapped. His voice turned cold and menacing. He said I was making a mistake, that I would regret this. He said he knew everything about me, that he knew where I lived, where I worked, who my friends and family were. He said he would make my life a living hell if I didn't take him back. I hung up the phone, terrified. I blocked his number, blocked him on social media, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. He was too far gone. For the next few weeks, I lived in constant fear. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and started carrying pepper spray. I avoided going out alone, and I always looked over my shoulder, afraid of who might be watching. He started harassing me online. He created fake profiles on social media, sending me threatening messages and posting embarrassing photos of me. He hacked into my email account and sent emails to my friends and family, revealing personal information and spreading lies about me. He started stalking me in real life. I'd see him outside my apartment, at my workplace, even at the grocery store. He'd just stand there, watching me, his eyes filled with a chilling intensity. I reported him to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he physically harmed me. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment had been broken into. The door was kicked in, and everything was ransacked. My belongings were scattered everywhere, and there were threatening messages written on the walls in red paint. "I'm watching you." One message read, "You can't escape me," read another. I called the police again, and this time, they took me seriously. They dusted for fingerprints and took photos of the damage. They told me to stay with a friend or family member until they could catch him. I went to stay with my cousin, a few hours away. I felt safer there, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every noise, afraid that Liam would find me. A few days later, the police called me. They had arrested Liam. He had been caught breaking into my apartment again. This time, they had enough evidence to charge him with stalking, harassment, and burglary. He was held in jail pending trial, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. I testified against him in court, recounting the horrific details of his behavior. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to several years in prison. Even though he's behind bars, I still struggle with the trauma of what happened. I have nightmares, I have panic attacks, and I have a hard time trusting people. I'm in therapy, trying to heal and move on, but it's a long and difficult process. I'm sharing this story because I want other people to be aware of the dangers of online dating. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of meeting someone new, but it's important to be cautious and to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't be afraid to walk away. Your safety and well-being are more important than anything else. And maybe, don't tell the person you met on Hinge everything about yourself. I still use Hinge sometimes, but I'm much more careful now. I take things slow, I do my research, and I listen to my gut. I know that not everyone on dating apps is a monster, but it's important to be vigilant and to protect yourself. This experience changed me forever. It taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of self-preservation and the dangers of ignoring my intuition. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help someone else avoid the nightmare that I went through. I never thought I'd be the victim of something like this, but it can happen to anyone. Stay safe out there, and be careful who you swipe right on. You never really know who's on the other side of that screen. I never thought I'd be this person. The person with the Tinder horror story, or the Craigslist killer encounter, or, God forbid, the Hinge hostage situation. I always rolled my eyes at those stories, thinking, come on, how dumb do you have to be to fall for that? Well, karma's a real bitch, and it turns out I'm plenty dumb enough. It started, as most modern tragedies do, with a swipe. Hinge, to be exact. I was fresh out of a long, soul-crushing relationship, and my friends convinced me to get back out there. I wasn't really feeling it, but I downloaded the app, filled out a profile with all the cliches, lover of dogs, passionate about travel, seeking someone who doesn't take themselves too seriously, and started swiping with the enthusiasm of someone scheduling a root canal. Then I saw him. Let's call him Ethan. Ethan was different, in a good way at first. He wasn't the typical gym selfie, fluent in sarcasm type. His profile was thoughtful, a little quirky, and his pictures showed him doing things I actually found interesting. Hiking in the mountains, volunteering at an animal shelter, playing a beat-up acoustic guitar at what looked like an open mic night. He seemed genuine, kind, and intelligent. Everything I thought I wanted. We matched, of course, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about books, movies, our families, our hopes and dreams. He was a writer, or so he claimed, working on a novel about the complexities of human connection. How meta, right? He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of texting, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date was perfect. He was even more attractive in person, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He listened intently when I spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made me laugh. There was an undeniable connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in years. We talked for hours, losing track of time, until the barista started giving us pointed looks. As we walked out, he took my hand, and I swear, I felt a jolt of electricity. We started seeing each other regularly. Movies, dinners, hikes, picnics in the park. It was like a whirlwind romance straight out of a rom-com. He was attentive, thoughtful, and incredibly romantic. He wrote me poems, surprised me with flowers, and even cooked me a gourmet meal at his apartment, which, by the way, was impeccably clean and stylish. I was completely smitten. I was falling hard, and I didn't care. But then, things started to get weird. Subtle things, at first, things I brushed off as quirks or coincidences. He started asking about my schedule, not in a casual, "What are you up to this weekend?" way, but in a detailed, almost obsessive way. He wanted to know exactly where I was going, who I was with, and how long I'd be there. He'd text me constantly, checking in, making sure I was safe. It was sweet at first, but it quickly became suffocating. He also started isolating me from my friends. He complained that they were a bad influence, that they didn't understand our relationship, that they were jealous of our happiness. He'd make me feel guilty for spending time with them, saying things like, "I thought you wanted to spend time with me." Eventually, I stopped seeing my friends as much. I didn't want to upset him. Then came the controlling behavior. He started telling me what to wear, criticizing my outfits, suggesting I dress more appropriately. He'd comment on my appearance, telling me I looked tired, or that I should wear more makeup. He even started monitoring my social media, getting angry if I liked or commented on another man's post. I knew, deep down, that this wasn't healthy, that this wasn't the loving, supportive relationship I thought I had. But I was so emotionally invested, so blinded by the initial romance, that I couldn't bring myself to end it. I kept making excuses for him, telling myself that he was just insecure, that he just loved me too much. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon. I was supposed to meet my friend Sarah for brunch, but Ethan had been acting particularly clingy that morning. He begged me to stay home, saying he was feeling sick and needed me to take care of him. I felt guilty, but I told him I couldn't cancel on Sarah. He got furious. He started yelling, accusing me of not caring about him, of putting my friends before him. He said he couldn't believe I was being so selfish. I tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, hard, and wouldn't let me leave. I started to cry. "Please, Ethan," I begged. "Just let me go. I'll be back in a few hours." He stared at me, his eyes filled with a coldness I had never seen before. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're staying here with me. Forever." That's when I knew I was in real danger. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. He dragged me into the bedroom and locked the door. I was terrified. I didn't know what he was going to do. He pinned me to the bed and started ranting about how much he loved me, how he couldn't live without me, how we were meant to be together. He was completely delusional, lost in his own twisted fantasy. I tried to remain calm, to reason with him, but it was no use. He was beyond reason. Hours passed. I don't know how long I was trapped in that room. He wouldn't let me leave. He wouldn't let me use my phone. He just kept talking, ranting, and crying. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I was scared, but I knew I had to do something. I had to find a way to escape. While he was in the bathroom, I managed to find my phone and quickly texted my friend that I was in danger and needed help. My phone died immediately after I sent the message. When he came back, I pretended I was asleep. He stared at me for a long time, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and hate. Then, he lay down next to me and fell asleep. I waited for what felt like an eternity, listening to his heavy breathing, making sure he was really asleep. Then, slowly and carefully, I got out of bed. I tiptoed to the door and unlocked it. I crept out of the bedroom and ran as fast as I could to the front door. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, I got the door open and ran out into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached a nearby gas station. The clerk called the police, who arrived within minutes. They took my statement and then went to Ethan's apartment to arrest him. I found out later that my friend had called police after getting my text. They were able to track my phone to Ethan's apartment, and they arrived just in time. Ethan was arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. He's currently awaiting trial. I'm still recovering from the trauma of what happened. I'm seeing a therapist, and I'm slowly starting to rebuild my life. It's hard, but I'm determined to move on. I'll never be the same person I was before, but I'm stronger now. I'm more aware of the red flags, more cautious about who I let into my life. I still use Hinge, occasionally, but I'm much more careful now. I do thorough background checks. I meet in public places, and I always tell my friends where I'm going and who I'm with. I never thought I'd be this person, the person with the Hinge hostage situation, but I am. And if my story can help even one person avoid a similar situation, then it's worth telling. Be careful out there, people. The internet is a dangerous place, and not everyone is who they seem to be. Trust your gut, and don't ignore the red flags. Your life may depend on it. And never, ever underestimate the power of a dead phone to increase the drama tenfold. I need to tell someone about this because it's been eating me up for months, and it's too insane to tell anyone I actually know. It all started on Hinge. Yeah, I know, dating apps. But I was bored, lonely, and figured why not? I'd been on them before, had a few okay dates, nothing spectacular. This time, though, this was different. His profile was pretty standard. Decent photos. A couple of prompts answered with the usual witty banter. His name was Alex. He was a graphic designer. Loved hiking, blah blah blah. Nothing that screamed serial killer or anything. We matched, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Not just a hey, wanna hook up kind of guy. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite movies. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely kind. I was actually starting to get excited about the prospect of meeting him. We talked for about a week before he suggested we grab coffee. I was hesitant at first. I always am. Meeting strangers from the internet is inherently risky, but he seemed so normal, so safe. I told a couple of my friends about him, sent them screenshots of his profile, and made sure they knew where I was going and who I was meeting. Safety first, right? The coffee date went great. He was even more charming in person. We talked for hours, laughing and joking like we'd known each other forever. There were no awkward silences, no red flags, nothing that made me want to run for the hills. We both admitted we were having a good time, and he asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime next week. I said yes, obviously. The next few weeks were a blur of dates. Dinner, movies, hikes, even a concert. We were practically inseparable. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He was attentive, supportive, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. My friends were even starting to tease me about how smitten I was. I was falling hard, and I didn't care. But then things started to get weird. It started small, subtle things that I initially brushed off as coincidence, or me just being paranoid. Like one time, I mentioned in passing that I was thinking of getting a new plant for my apartment, and the next day, he showed up with the exact plant I had described. He said he just happened to see it at the store and thought of me, but it felt a little too convenient. Then there was the time I was complaining about a coworker who was constantly stealing my lunch from the office fridge, and the next day, that coworker called in sick. Alex claimed he had nothing to do with it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow involved. These incidents were few and far between, and I tried to convince myself that I was just being overly sensitive. But the feeling of unease kept growing, nagging at the back of my mind. Then came the nightmares. Vivid, disturbing dreams where Alex was someone else, someone dark and menacing. In the dreams, he would stalk me, watching me from the shadows, his eyes filled with a chilling intensity. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, terrified to go back to sleep. I started avoiding him, making excuses to cancel our dates. I needed time to figure out what was going on, to decide if I was just being crazy or if there was something genuinely wrong with him. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a photo that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of Alex, standing in front of my apartment building. The photo had been posted a few hours earlier, and the caption read, "Watching over you." I felt a surge of panic wash over me. He knew where I lived. He was watching me. I immediately blocked him on all social media, deleted his number from my phone, and deactivated my Hinge profile. I didn't want him to be able to contact me in any way. I felt like I was being hunted. I stayed at my friend Sarah's house for a few days, too scared to go back to my own apartment. When I finally did go back, I was armed with a can of pepper spray and a baseball bat. I checked every room, every closet, every corner of the apartment, making sure he wasn't hiding anywhere. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and bought a Ring doorbell camera. I was determined to protect myself. A few weeks went by, and I didn't hear from him. I started to think maybe I had overreacted, that maybe he was just a little intense, and I had scared him off. Maybe the nightmares and the coincidences were just a product of my own anxiety. But then, one night, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I didn't recognize the return address, but I was curious, so I opened it. Inside, there was a single object, a photograph. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed. The photo had been taken through my bedroom window. I screamed. I dropped the box and ran to the bathroom, where I locked myself in and sobbed uncontrollably. He was still watching me. He had been inside my apartment. He was getting closer. I called the police, showed them the photo, told them everything that had happened. They took it seriously, but there wasn't much they could do. They said they would increase patrols in the area and keep an eye out for him. But unless he actually threatened me or committed a crime, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. I felt helpless. I was trapped in a nightmare, and there was no escape. I decided I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. It was no longer safe. I packed up my belongings and moved to a different city, to a place where he wouldn't be able to find me. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my closest friends. I wanted to disappear completely. It's been several months since I moved. I haven't heard from Alex, and I haven't seen him. I'm still terrified, though. I still have nightmares. I still check my locks 3 times before bed. I still look over my shoulder when I'm walking down the street. I don't know if he's still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. I'm sharing this story because I want other people to be aware of the dangers of online dating. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of meeting someone new, but you have to be careful. You have to trust your instincts, and you have to be willing to walk away if something feels wrong. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't rationalize the weird behavior. Don't let yourself be blinded by charm or infatuation. Your safety is more important than anything else. I made a mistake. I let my guard down, and I almost paid the price. I'm lucky to be alive. Be careful out there. You never know who's lurking behind the screen, waiting to prey on your vulnerability. And maybe, just maybe, don't use Hinge. I wish I could say I learned my lesson after the Nathan debacle, but I didn't. Call me naive, call me stubborn, but I'm a firm believer in second chances, or, in this case, second swipes. So, after a few months of self-imposed dating app exile, I found myself back on Hinge, cautiously optimistic, determined to not let one bad experience ruin it for me. Hinge felt safer somehow. More curated, less chaotic than Tinder, designed to be deleted, they said. I bought into the marketing. That's how I met Liam. Liam's profile was normal, refreshingly so after Nathan. He had a good smile, pictures with friends, actual friends, not blurry figures in the background, and prompts that showed a sense of humor. I'm looking for someone who can beat me at Mario Kart, but will still let me win sometimes. My simple pleasures include coffee, bookstores, and dogs. Basic, yes, but also nice. Safe. Exactly what I thought I needed. We matched, we chatted, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't intense or overly poetic. He was just regular. He asked about my day, my job, my hobbies. He listened when I talked, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of texting, he suggested we meet for coffee. I agreed, cautiously optimistic. This time, I did everything right. I told my friends where I was going, shared his picture and profile, and even set up a check-in system. I was prepared, or so I thought. The coffee date was fine. Liam was just as he seemed online, friendly, easy to talk to, a little bit nerdy. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite books. He laughed at my jokes, and I laughed at his. There were no red flags, no weird questions, no unsettling vibes. It was pleasant, almost too pleasant. My gut was telling me something was off, but I ignored it. After what happened with Nathan, I was determined not to overreact, not to let my paranoia get the best of me. I told myself I was just being overly cautious, that Liam was a genuinely nice guy. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time and would love to see me again. I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to say no, but I ignored them. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I needed to give him a chance. I said yes. That was my first mistake. Our second date was at a local brewery. Again, everything seemed normal. We drank craft beer, played board games, and talked for hours. Liam was charming and attentive, and I found myself starting to relax, starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found a decent guy. But then, as the night wore on, things started to shift. Subtle things, almost imperceptible at first. He started asking more personal questions, probing into my past relationships, my insecurities, my fears. He seemed particularly interested in my living situation, my daily routine, who I spent my time with. Again, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just trying to get to know me better. But something about his questions felt calculated, like he was gathering information, piece by piece. As we were leaving, he offered to drive me home. I almost said yes, but something stopped me. My gut, screaming louder this time. I told him I had to get up early the next day and wanted to drive myself. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't push it. We hugged goodbye, and I got in my car, a wave of unease washing over me. The next few weeks were a blur of dates and text messages. Liam was constantly in contact, showering me with attention. He'd text me good morning, good night, and everything in between. He'd call me just to chat, or to tell me about his day. He was always available, always eager to see me. It was overwhelming, suffocating almost, but I ignored that too. I told myself I was lucky to have found someone who cared about me so much. But underneath the surface, my unease was growing. I started noticing things about Liam that I hadn't seen before. He was always slightly off. His eyes would sometimes glaze over, like he was looking at something I couldn't see. He'd say things that didn't quite make sense, cryptic comments that seemed to hint at something darker. He'd ask me the same questions over and over, as if he were trying to catch me in a lie. And he was always watching me. Always. Even when we were in a crowded room, I could feel his eyes on me, dissecting me, analyzing me. I started feeling like I was being observed. One evening, I was at my apartment, getting ready for a date with Liam. I was running late, so I was rushing around, throwing on clothes, and doing my makeup. As I was putting on my mascara, I glanced out the window and saw him. He was standing across the street, in the shadows, just watching my apartment. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there, motionless, like a statue. I froze, my blood turning to ice. He saw me see him. For a moment, we just stared at each other, locked in a silent, terrifying gaze. Then, he slowly turned and walked away. I didn't go on the date. I called Liam and told him I was sick. He seemed concerned, but not surprised. He offered to come over and take care of me, but I refused. I told him I just needed to rest. After I hung up, I turned off all the lights and locked myself in my bedroom. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, listening to every creak and groan of the building, convinced that Liam was outside, watching me. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I did a reverse image search on Liam's profile picture, and what I found chilled me to the bone. The picture was from a stock photo website. Man smiling, the caption read. I felt sick. Everything clicked into place. The fake profile, the overly attentive behavior, the strange questions, the watching. It was all a lie. I had been catfished. But why? What was Liam planning? I started digging deeper, searching for any information about him online. I found nothing. No social media, no employment history, no trace of his existence. It was like he was a ghost. That's when I decided to go to the police. I told them everything about the catfish profile, the strange behavior, the watching, the stock photo. They listened patiently, but they were skeptical. They said it sounded like a case of online harassment, but without any concrete evidence. There wasn't much they could do. They told me to block Liam on all social media and to avoid any contact with him. They said they would keep an eye on things, but they couldn't guarantee my safety. I was terrified. I knew that blocking Liam wouldn't stop him. He was too persistent, too determined. He would find a way to get to me. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started carrying pepper spray, and I installed security cameras in my apartment. I changed my locks, and I told my friends to be on the lookout for anything suspicious. I was living in a constant state of paranoia, jumping at every shadow, questioning every stranger. A week went by, and I didn't hear from Liam. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, he had given up. That maybe I was safe. I was wrong. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart stopped. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I reached for my pepper spray, my hand shaking. "Liam." I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I flicked on the lights, and that's when I saw it. Scrawled across my living room wall, in blood-red paint, were the words, "I'm always watching." I screamed. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop until I reached my friend's place. I called the police again, hysterical. They arrived quickly and searched the apartment. They found no sign of Liam, but they did find something else. A hidden camera in my bedroom, pointed directly at my bed. That was the final straw. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed my bags and moved out the next day. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my friends. I needed to disappear, to start over, to escape Liam's grasp. It's been years since that night, and I still don't know who Liam was, or what he wanted. I never heard from him again, but I still look over my shoulder, always wondering if he's out there, watching me. I'm still afraid. I wish I had listened to my instincts that day. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, the days that followed would have been a nightmare I would never have woken up from. It's a constant reminder that sometimes the safest option is the one that feels the most uncomfortable. I used to scoff at those dating app horror stories, you know? The ones where people meet up with someone who's completely different from their profile, or worse, someone who turns out to be straight up dangerous. I always thought, come on, people are exaggerating. Just be smart, do your research, meet in a public place. I was convinced it was all made up for clicks and views. I was so naive. It all started pretty innocently. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and my friends were pushing me to get back out there. Hinge seemed like the least horrifying option. Less hookup-y than Tinder, more curated than Bumble. I filled out my profile, answered the prompts honestly, maybe a little too honestly in retrospect, and started swiping. I matched with a guy named Liam. His profile was appealing. He had that artsy but not pretentious vibe, if that makes sense. His pictures were well composed, showing him in various creative pursuits, playing guitar, sketching in a notebook, hiking in some scenic location. His prompts were thoughtful and funny, referencing obscure films and indie bands. He seemed intelligent, witty, and genuinely interesting. Way out of my usual league, honestly. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, our shared love of old movies. He was engaging, empathetic, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. There were no red flags, no weird vibes, nothing to suggest that this was anything other than a promising connection. After a week or so of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I picked a busy cafe near my apartment, just to be safe. I even told my roommate, Sarah, about him and sent her his profile, just in case. You know, the standard safety precautions. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. He was wearing a worn leather jacket and a vintage t-shirt, effortlessly cool. The conversation was just as easy and engaging as it had been online. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. I felt a genuine connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. We went on a few more dates after that. A museum, a concert, a picnic in the park. Each date was better than the last. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me on a deeper level. He was opening up about his past, his fears, his dreams. I was falling for him hard. Then, things started to get off. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Little things that I brushed off as quirks or misunderstandings. He started getting possessive, wanting to know where I was and who I was with at all times. He'd text me constantly, even when I was at work or with friends. It wasn't overtly controlling, but it was persistent, a low hum of anxiety that started to creep into my thoughts. He also started making strange comments about my friends, particularly the male ones. He'd subtly suggest that they were interested in me, that they were trying to sabotage our relationship. He'd plant seeds of doubt in my mind, making me question their motives and intentions. I started to distance myself from them, not wanting to cause any conflict or drama. The first real red flag came a few weeks later. We were at his apartment, watching a movie. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was scrolling through my phone. He claimed he was just looking for the remote, but I saw the panic in his eyes. He was clearly looking at my messages, probably checking who I was talking to. I confronted him about it, and he apologized profusely. He said he was just insecure, that he was afraid of losing me. He swore he'd never do it again. I wanted to believe him, but the trust was broken. Things continued to deteriorate. He became more and more controlling, more and more paranoid. He started accusing me of lying, of cheating, of hiding things from him. He'd fly into rages over the smallest things, screaming and yelling until I was in tears. Then he'd apologize, begging for forgiveness, promising to change. I knew I needed to get out, but I was scared. He had isolated me from my friends, manipulated my emotions, and made me question my own sanity. I felt trapped, like I was living in a nightmare. One night, it escalated. We were at his apartment, and he started accusing me of flirting with the bartender earlier that evening. I tried to deny it, but he wouldn't listen. He became increasingly agitated, his eyes filled with a dark, frightening intensity. He grabbed my arm, squeezing it so hard that it bruised. He started yelling, his face inches from mine. "You think you can just lie to me?" he screamed. "You think I'm stupid?" I was terrified. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He dragged me into the bedroom, throwing me onto the bed. I started screaming, pleading with him to stop. He pinned me down, his weight crushing me. He started kissing me forcefully, his hands groping me. I fought back, kicking and scratching, but he was too strong. I won't go into detail about what happened next. It was traumatic, degrading, and something I'll never fully recover from. I managed to escape his apartment later that night, bruised, shaken, and utterly broken. I ran to Sarah's apartment, sobbing uncontrollably. She took me in, comforted me, and helped me call the police. The police took my statement and launched an investigation. They arrested Liam a few days later on charges of assault and sexual battery. He denied everything, claiming that I was lying, that I was trying to ruin his life. The trial was a nightmare. I had to relive the trauma over and over again, recounting every detail of that horrific night. Liam's lawyer tried to discredit me, painting me as a jealous, unstable woman who was out for revenge. Despite the lawyer's best efforts, the jury found Liam guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to several years in prison. Even though he was behind bars, I still felt afraid. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, and started therapy. It took me a long time to feel safe again, to trust anyone. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his controlling behavior, his violent outbursts, his violation of my body and my spirit. I still struggle with feelings of guilt and shame, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have seen the red flags earlier. Looking back, there were definitely signs. The possessiveness, the jealousy, the manipulation, the gaslighting. But I was so blinded by the initial charm, the initial connection, that I ignored them. I wanted to believe that he was the perfect guy, the one I had been waiting for. I learned a valuable, albeit painful, lesson. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming or appealing the person may seem. And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're in a dangerous situation, reach out to your friends, your family, or the authorities. You're not alone, and you don't have to suffer in silence. I used to think those dating app horror stories were made up. I was wrong. They're real, and they can happen to anyone. Be careful out there, and always prioritize your safety. Okay, so I guess I should start by saying I wasn't ever really into the whole online dating thing. I always thought it felt a little forced, like trying to manufacture chemistry or something. But after a particularly brutal breakup and a lot of encouragement from my friends, I caved and downloaded Hinge. Hinge seemed less aggressively hookup-y than Tinder, a little more geared towards finding something real. I liked the prompts, the focus on personality rather than just a curated series of filtered selfies. So, I meticulously crafted my profile, choosing photos that showed my hobbies, my alleged sense of humor, and just generally trying to present myself as a well-rounded, dateable human being. I started swiping, or rather, liking profiles, and pretty soon I matched with this guy named Alex. He was ridiculously attractive, like model-level attractive, but his profile wasn't just pretty pictures. He had thoughtful answers to the prompts, talked about his love for hiking and indie films, and seemed genuinely kind and intelligent. I was cautiously optimistic. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was witty, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our biggest fears. After a week of intense texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. The coffee date was perfect. He was even more charming in person, with a disarming smile and a genuine warmth that made me feel instantly comfortable. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories, and by the end of the date, I was completely smitten. I felt like I had found someone truly special, someone who got me. We started seeing each other regularly. Hiking, movies, dinners, everything felt effortless and fun. He was attentive, thoughtful, and made me feel like the most amazing woman in the world. He even surprised me with flowers on our third date, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was falling hard and fast. I introduced him to my friends, who were equally impressed. They all said he seemed too good to be true, which, in hindsight, should have been a red flag. But I was so blinded by the initial rush of romance that I brushed their concerns aside. About a month into our relationship, Alex started acting a little strange. He became more secretive, often disappearing for hours without explanation. He stopped responding to my texts as quickly, and when we were together, he seemed distracted and distant. When I asked him if everything was okay, he would just brush it off, saying he was stressed about work. I tried to be understanding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I was being too clingy or demanding. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe I was just projecting my past relationship insecurities onto him. One Saturday, Alex told me he had to work late and wouldn't be able to see me. I was disappointed, but I understood. I decided to spend the evening catching up on some reading and watching a movie. Around 10 p.m., I got a text from him saying he was finally done with work and was heading home. I was about to reply when I got a notification from Instagram. One of my friends had tagged me in a post. It was a picture of Alex at a bar downtown, making out with another woman. My heart sank. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The world seemed to spin around me. I stared at the picture in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. It couldn't be real, right? There had to be some mistake. But it was real. There he was, the man I thought I was falling in love with, kissing someone else. I immediately called him, my hand shaking. He didn't answer. I called again and again and again. Still nothing. I texted him, demanding an explanation, but he ignored my messages. I spent the rest of the night crying and trying to make sense of what had happened. How could he do this to me? How could he lie to me so easily? I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly heartbroken. The next morning, I woke up with a determination to confront him. I drove to his apartment, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to make him feel the pain he had caused me. When I arrived, I knocked on his door. He opened it, looking surprised and slightly disheveled. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance in his eyes. "I saw the picture, Alex," I said, my voice trembling. "I know what you did." He sighed and stepped aside, letting me into his apartment. He didn't try to deny it. He admitted to cheating, offering a flimsy excuse about being confused and needing space. I didn't buy it for a second. I told him I was done, that I never wanted to see him again. I walked out of his apartment, feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief. In the days that followed, I went through the typical breakup motions. I cried. I ate ice cream. I vented to my friends. I replayed the relationship in my head, searching for clues, trying to understand how I could have been so blind. It was then that I decided to reach out to the girl in the photo. She was really nice and explained how she had been dating him on and off for about 5 months, but had never been on an official date with him. She showed screenshots of their Hinge conversation, and she had been told the same story I had been told about wanting to find something real. I learned a valuable lesson that day about the importance of trusting my instincts and not letting myself be swept away by a superficial charm. Alex had presented himself as the perfect guy, but beneath the surface, he was a master manipulator, preying on my vulnerability and insecurities. He had a pattern, and Hinge enabled it. It's easier to play a part when you have such little time to meet. The initial high had blinded me to the red flags, to the inconsistencies in his behavior. I had ignored my gut feeling because I wanted so badly to believe that I had found the one. I realized that online dating, while convenient, could also be a breeding ground for deception. People can create idealized versions of themselves, hiding their flaws and manipulating others with carefully curated profiles and witty banter. It's easy to get caught up in the fantasy, to project your hopes and dreams onto someone you barely know. I'm not saying that online dating is inherently bad. I know plenty of people who have found genuine connections and lasting relationships through apps like Hinge. But my experience with Alex taught me to be more cautious, more discerning, and more trusting of my own intuition. It's important to remember that behind every profile, there's a real person with their own complexities, flaws, and motivations. And it's up to you to see beyond the surface and determine if they're truly who they claim to be. I went back to look at his profile and realized that all of his photos had no one else in it. He had specifically made himself mysterious to lure in the type of girl he knew was the type he could get over on. I deleted Hinge. I still don't know if I'll try it again. Maybe eventually. But for now, I'm focusing on building real connections in the real world with people who are honest, authentic, and willing to show their true selves, flaws and all. I'm scared to put myself out there like that again. I feel betrayed by something so stupid. I wish he hadn't chosen me to use. This is really hard for me to talk about. I haven't told many people, and honestly, writing it down feels almost as bad as living it. But you asked for a Hinge horror story, and well, buckle up. I was in a really bad place a couple of years ago, fresh out of a messy breakup, feeling totally lost and alone. You know the drill. My friends kept telling me to get back out there, to download Hinge. It'll be fun, just a distraction. So I did. I made a profile, put up some decent pictures, and started swiping, or liking, whatever you do on Hinge. I wasn't really expecting anything, just trying to fill the void, I guess. Then I matched with him. Liam. He was different. Not in a good way, not at first anyway. His profile was full of those generic outdoorsy pictures, hiking, camping, the whole 9 yards. But his prompts were weird. One said, "My greatest strength is knowing what you need before you do." Another was, "I'm looking for someone who understands the language of silence." It was all very intense, you know. Red flags waving like crazy, but I ignored them. I was vulnerable, and he seemed, I don't know, attentive. We started chatting, and he was incredibly charming, almost too charming. He showered me with compliments, told me I was beautiful, intelligent, fascinating. He listened to everything I said, remembered every detail. It was intoxicating, especially after being with someone who barely paid attention to me before. We met up after a week of talking. He took me to this small, cozy Italian restaurant, the kind with candlelight and soft music. He pulled out my chair, held my hand, and looked me in the eyes the whole time. It felt like something out of a movie. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my dreams, my fears, my past. The problem was, he was also off. Like, he would stare a little too long, his eyes too intense. And he kept making these little comments about how we were meant to be together, how he could feel a connection between us, like we were soulmates. It was a little much for a first date, but I brushed it off. He was just being romantic, right? We started seeing each other regularly. He was always available, always eager to spend time with me. He planned these elaborate dates, picnics in the park, museum visits, even a weekend getaway to a cabin in the woods. It was like he was trying to create this perfect, fairy tale romance for us. But the red flags kept piling up. He started getting possessive. He didn't like me spending time with my friends, telling me they were a bad influence, that they didn't understand our connection. He would constantly text me when I was out, wanting to know where I was, who I was with. He started showing up unannounced at my apartment, just to surprise me. He also had this weird habit of knowing things he shouldn't have known. Like, he would bring up conversations I had with my friends that I never told him about. Or he would know details about my childhood that I hadn't shared with anyone in years. It was like he was reading my mind, or worse, spying on me. I tried to talk to him about it, to tell him that I needed space, that his behavior was making me uncomfortable. But he would always turn it around on me, accusing me of not trusting him, of not appreciating his love. He would cry, beg me to stay, promise to change. And I, being the naive idiot that I was, would always give in. Things came to a head one night. I was at a friend's birthday party, and Liam kept texting me, demanding to know when I was coming home. I ignored him, trying to enjoy myself. When I finally got back to my apartment, He was waiting for me outside. He was furious. He started yelling at me, accusing me of cheating on him, of lying to him. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening until it hurt. He dragged me inside, throwing me onto the couch. I was terrified. I had never seen him like this before. His eyes were wild, his face contorted with rage. He started pacing around the room, ranting and raving about how much he loved me, how he couldn't live without me. Then he stopped, and he looked at me with a strange, vacant expression. He said, "I know everything about you. I know your deepest fears, your darkest secrets. I know what you need, even before you do. You can't escape me. We're connected forever." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. I screamed. I managed to scramble off the couch and run towards the door. He lunged at me, grabbing my hair. I fought back, kicking and scratching, anything to get away. I finally managed to break free and run out of the apartment. I ran to my neighbor's apartment, banging on the door until they opened it. I was hysterical, crying, and shaking. They called the police. When the police arrived, Liam was gone. They searched my apartment, but he was nowhere to be found. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They said it was probably just a lover's quarrel, that he would cool off and come back later. But I knew better. I knew that Liam was dangerous, that he was capable of anything. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I stayed at my friend's place, terrified that Liam would find me. The next day, I filed a restraining order against him. The police finally started taking me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation, but they couldn't find him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I lived in fear for months. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I had nightmares every night, reliving that night over and over again. Eventually, the police closed the case. They said they had exhausted all leads, that Liam was probably long gone. But I never stopped looking over my shoulder. A year later, I got a message on Hinge. It was a new profile, no picture, just a single line of text. "I told you, we're connected forever." I deleted the app immediately. I haven't used dating apps since. I don't think I ever will again. I still don't know who Liam was or what he wanted, but I know that he was a monster and that he almost destroyed my life. I learned a hard lesson about trusting strangers, about ignoring red flags, and about the dangers of online dating. I'm still trying to heal from what happened. I go to therapy, I talk to my friends, and I try to focus on the good things in my life. But the fear is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I know that he could be anywhere, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike again. This is why I can barely bring myself to talk about it. It's a part of my life that I want to forget, but I know I never will. It's a reminder of how vulnerable we are, how easily we can be manipulated, and how dangerous the world can be, even in the seemingly safe space of a dating app. So yeah, that's my Hinge horror story. It's not just a story, it's my reality, and it's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I never thought this would happen to me, but here I am, a year later, still waking up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, replaying the events of that summer like a broken record. I'd always been pretty cautious about online dating, even though all my friends were constantly telling me to get on Hinge. They said it was the relationship app, the one where people actually wanted something real, not just a hookup. I was in my late 20s, and the whole hookup scene had started to feel exhausting, so I finally caved. Made a profile, picked some decent photos, and answered the prompts honestly, maybe a little too honestly looking back. I swiped through the usual suspects, guys holding fish, guys posing with their dogs, guys who looked suspiciously like they were still living in their mom's basement. Then I came across Liam's profile. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he had this kind, open face and a warm smile. His prompts were thoughtful and funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know people. We matched almost immediately, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was a writer, loved old movies, and had a slightly nerdy sense of humor that matched mine perfectly. We talked for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe in my neighborhood. I liked that he picked a place I knew and felt comfortable in, and I was excited to finally meet him in person. The date was amazing. He was even better in person than he was online. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, laughing and sharing stories. He was attentive, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks, and each one was better than the last. We had so much in common, and I felt like I could truly be myself around him. He was open, honest, and vulnerable, and he encouraged me to be the same. It felt like something real, something special, something I had been searching for a long time. Then, things started to get weird. It started small, almost imperceptible. He would ask me questions about my past, not just the usual getting to know you stuff, but really specific details. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my previous relationships. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to get to know me better. But the questions kept coming, more and more intense, more and more personal. He started asking about my daily routine, what time I left for work, what time I came home, what I did on the weekends. He wanted to know about my friends, my coworkers, even my neighbors. He seemed to be compiling information, piece by piece, like he was building a profile of my life. Then, he started showing up unannounced. He would happen to be in my neighborhood when I was walking home from work, or he would just be passing by my apartment when I was running errands. At first, I thought it was sweet, a romantic gesture, but then it started to feel invasive, like he was watching me, like he knew my every move. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing day. I started noticing other things, too, little things that didn't quite add up. He would contradict himself when talking about his past, or he would say things that didn't quite align with what he had told me before. One night, I was looking through his Instagram profile, which was surprisingly sparse, considering he was a writer, and I noticed something strange. One of the photos was tagged with a location that didn't match the caption. The photo was supposedly taken at a bookstore in his neighborhood, but the location tag pointed to a small town several hours away. I confronted him about it, and he got defensive. He said it was a mistake, that he must have accidentally tagged the wrong location. But I didn't believe him. Something was off. Something was deeply wrong. I decided to do some digging. I started with a simple Google search of his name, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no articles, no mentions anywhere online. It was like he didn't exist, which was strange, considering he was supposed to be a writer. I then tried searching his name in a few online databases, but still nothing. It was like he had completely fabricated his identity. I started to panic. Who was this man I had been dating? What was he hiding? I decided to take things into my own hands. I waited until he was at work. He had told me he worked at a local library, which I was starting to doubt, and I went to his apartment. He had given me a key a few weeks earlier, which I now regretted accepting. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, almost sterile. There were no personal touches, no photos, no decorations. It felt like a temporary residence, like someone was just passing through. I started searching through his belongings, desperately looking for something, anything, that could give me a clue as to who he really was. I found a laptop in his backpack, and I tried to log in, but it was password protected. I tried a few obvious passwords, but none of them worked. Then, on a whim, I typed in my name. To my shock, it worked. I opened his browser history, and what I found chilled me to the bone. He had been searching for information about me for weeks. He had been tracking my online activity, reading my social media posts, even accessing my private accounts. He knew everything about me, my hopes, my fears, my secrets. But that wasn't the worst part. He had also been searching for information about other women, women who looked eerily similar to me. He had been researching their lives, their routines, their habits. It was like he was searching for a replacement, someone to fill a void. I found a folder on his desktop labeled Project. Inside, there were dozens of photos of me, taken without my knowledge. There were photos of me walking down the street, photos of me at work, photos of me sleeping in my apartment. He had been watching me, stalking me for weeks. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been so blind, so naive. I had fallen for his charm, his kindness, his vulnerability. But it had all been a lie, a carefully constructed facade to lure me into his trap. I backed up his hard drive onto a USB stick, and then I left, locking the door behind me. I went straight to the police and told them everything. I showed them the photos, the browser history, the stolen data. They took me seriously, but they said they needed more evidence to make an arrest. I spent the next few days in a state of constant fear, terrified that Liam would find me, that he would hurt me. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and stayed with a friend. The police were able to find Liam at his work and brought him in for questioning. They found nothing that they could hold him on and ultimately let him go. A few days later, Liam showed up at my friend's house, banging on the door, screaming my name. He was furious, enraged that I had betrayed him. He said he loved me, that he only wanted to protect me. But his eyes were wild, his face contorted with rage. The police arrived and took him into custody. This time, they had enough evidence to charge him with stalking and harassment. I didn't ever hear from him again. I went on with my life, but the memories still haunted me. I eventually got married, and the nightmare started again. I learned the man was now living in my town. That broke me. Liam was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I testified at his trial, recounting the events of that summer, reliving the fear and trauma. It was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. After the trial, I tried to move on with my life. I went to therapy. I reconnected with friends and family, and I tried to rebuild my trust in people. It was a long and difficult process, but I eventually started to heal. But I never forgot what happened. I never forgot the fear, the betrayal, the feeling of being watched. I never forgot Liam's face, his eyes, the way he made me feel. I still use Hinge, but I'm much more cautious now. I'm more selective about who I match with, and I'm much more careful about sharing personal information. I've learned that you can never really know someone, not even someone you think you love. And I've learned that sometimes the most charming and kind people are the ones you need to be most afraid of. Hinge isn't where I found love. It's where I found a living nightmare. So I'm usually not one to share stuff like this, especially not online, but I feel like I need to get it out there. Maybe as a warning, maybe just to process it. Because honestly, I'm still freaked out. This happened a few months ago. I was going through a rough patch, just out of a long-term relationship, feeling lonely. You know the drill. My friends kept telling me to get back on the dating apps, specifically Hinge, because it was less hookup-y than Tinder. I wasn't really feeling it, but I figured what the hell, might as well give it a shot. I set up a profile, put up some decent pictures, wrote a witty bio, the usual. I matched with a few guys, had some lukewarm conversations, nothing that really clicked. Then I matched with Liam. He was different, in a way that felt good, at first. His profile was thoughtful, not just a bunch of shirtless selfies. He had a real bio, talking about his love for indie movies and obscure literature. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my interests, and actually listening to my answers. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary, just normal, which, honestly, was a breath of fresh air. We had a lot in common, at least on the surface. We both loved old bookstores, hated reality TV, and had a weird obsession with documentaries about cults. I know, red flag alert, right? But at the time, it just felt like a quirky coincidence. We decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small, independent cafe in a part of town I didn't usually frequent. It was a little out of the way, but I figured it was worth checking out. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls lined with books. It had a cool, artsy vibe. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked even better in person than in his pictures. He had this kind of intense, brooding look about him, like he was always thinking about something deep. The coffee date went great. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He listened intently, making eye contact and nodding thoughtfully. It was the kind of conversation that made you forget you were even on a date. I left feeling like I'd actually connected with someone, which was rare for me on dating apps. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went to movies, explored hidden cafes, and even took a day trip to a nearby town. He was always respectful and considerate, never pushy or demanding. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me on a deeper level. I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. But then things started to get weird. Subtly, at first, like a low hum in the background that you can't quite place. He started asking me strange questions, things that felt a little too personal, a little too intense. He wanted to know about my childhood traumas, my deepest fears, my darkest secrets. It wasn't like he was interrogating me, but he'd bring these topics up casually, like he was just curious. He also started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. I'd be at the grocery store, and he'd suddenly appear in the next aisle. Or I'd be walking my dog in the park, and he'd be sitting on a bench, reading a book. He always had a plausible explanation. He lived nearby. He was just running errands. He liked that particular park. But it started to feel like he was watching me. One night, I was at home, watching TV, when I got a text from him. "I can see you." I froze. My apartment was on the second floor, and my curtains were drawn. There was no way he could see me. I texted back, "What do you mean?" He replied, "Just thinking about you." I didn't respond. I got up and checked all the windows and doors, making sure they were locked. I felt this creeping sense of dread, like I was being hunted. I started to distance myself from him after that. I made excuses, canceled dates, avoided his calls. He didn't take it well. He started sending me increasingly desperate messages, begging me to talk to him, telling me he couldn't live without me. It was suffocating. Then one day, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I opened it cautiously, and inside was a photograph. It was a picture of me, taken through my living room window. I was sitting on the couch, watching TV, completely unaware that I was being photographed. On the back of the photo, he'd written, "You can't hide from me." I called the police. I showed them the picture, the text messages, everything. They took it seriously, but they said there wasn't much they could do until he actually did something. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. The restraining order seemed to make things worse. He started calling me from burner phones, sending me anonymous emails, leaving creepy gifts on my doorstep. It was like he was taunting me, pushing me to the edge. One night, I was coming home from work when I saw him standing across the street from my apartment building. He was just standing there, staring at me, with this unsettling smile on his face. I panicked and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, terrified, listening to every creak and groan of the building. I knew he was out there, somewhere, watching me. The next morning, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house, which was a few hours away. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my friends. I just needed to get away, to feel safe. I stayed at my parents' house for a few weeks, trying to recover from the ordeal. I barely left the house, afraid that he'd find me. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process the trauma I'd experienced. Eventually, I decided to move to a different city. I got a new job, a new apartment, a new phone number. I cut off all contact with everyone I knew, except for my family. I wanted to start over, to erase the past. It's been a few months since I moved, and I haven't heard from Liam. I'm still terrified that he'll find me, that he's still out there, watching me. I check my locks obsessively, and I'm always looking over my shoulder. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe again. The scariest part of all of this is that it actually happened. It wasn't a movie, or a TV show, or a creepy internet story. It was my life. And it all started with a simple swipe on Hinge. I'm sharing this story because I want other people to be aware of the dangers of online dating. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of meeting someone new, but you need to be careful. Trust your gut, pay attention to red flags, and don't be afraid to walk away if something feels wrong. Your safety is more important than anything else. I still use dating apps sometimes, but I'm much more cautious now. I do extensive research on potential matches, and I always meet them in public places. I never give out my address or personal information until I'm absolutely sure I can trust them. What happened with Liam changed me. It made me more aware of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal people. It taught me that you can never really know someone, no matter how well you think you do. And it reminded me that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones you invite into your life. It started like any other conversation on Hinge, really. The app's algorithm, with its eerie precision, had deemed us compatible. Sarah's profile was bright and bubbly. Pictures of her hiking, laughing with friends, and one particularly charming shot of her covered in paint from a pottery class. Her prompts were witty and self-deprecating, the kind that made you think, okay, she seems genuinely fun. I was freshly out of a relationship, cautiously dipping my toes back into the dating pool, so I sent her a message referencing her love for hiking, and we matched almost instantly. The initial messages were light and easy. We talked about our favorite hiking trails, shared funny anecdotes about our jobs, and even bonded over our mutual love for bad reality TV. Sarah was quick-witted and engaging, and I found myself looking forward to her messages. It felt normal, refreshing even. After a few days of chatting, I suggested we move off the app and exchange numbers, and she readily agreed. Texting felt even more natural. We talked about everything and nothing, from our families to our hopes and dreams. There were no awkward silences or forced conversations. It felt like we had known each other for years. She had this way of making me feel seen and heard, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. We made plans to grab coffee the following weekend. Simple, low pressure, a chance to see if the online spark translated in person. The coffee date was perfect. Sarah was even more radiant in person than her picture suggested. Her laugh was infectious, and her eyes sparkled when she talked about her passions. We talked for hours, completely losing track of time. It felt like the universe had finally aligned, and I had found someone truly special. We made plans for a second date before we even left the coffee shop. The second date led to a third, then a fourth. We explored the city together, trying new restaurants, visiting museums, and even going to a drive-in movie. We were practically inseparable. I was falling hard, and I had a feeling she was falling too. I found myself forgetting about my previous relationship, about the hurt and disappointment. Sarah was like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that happiness was still possible. Then, about a month into dating, things started to shift. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. It began with Sarah becoming increasingly secretive about her phone. She would quickly turn the screen away whenever I was nearby, and she started getting calls at odd hours, always stepping outside to take them. I tried not to read into it too much, but a nagging feeling of unease began to creep in. I also noticed she was starting to ask me very specific questions about my daily routine. What time I left for work, what route I took, if I had any security cameras in my apartment building. At first, I brushed it off as her being interested in my life, but the questions became more frequent and more pointed, and it started to feel invasive. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a picture of me, sitting on my couch, taken from outside my window. The message read, "I see you." I didn't say anything to Sarah, but I grabbed my phone and went to another room and called the police. They said there was nothing they could do, and to call back if something else happens. I panicked. I tried to play it cool, but inside, I was terrified. I quickly turned off all the lights and shut the curtains tightly. I tried to act normal, and then I made up an excuse that I was extremely tired and asked her to leave. It was getting late anyway. As soon as Sarah left, I checked all the locks on my doors and windows. I turned on every light in my apartment. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak and groan of the building. The next morning, I replayed the events of the past few weeks in my head, trying to make sense of it all. Sarah's secrecy, her questions, the picture, it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. She was stalking me. I knew I had to end things, but I was afraid of what she might do. I couldn't just ghost her. She clearly knew where I lived. I decided to meet her in a public place and break up with her as calmly as possible. I chose a crowded coffee shop, hoping that the presence of other people would deter her from doing anything drastic. When I met her at the coffee shop, she seemed her usual cheerful self. But as soon as I started talking, her demeanor changed. Her smile faded and her eyes narrowed. She listened in silence as I explained that I didn't think we were a good fit and that I wanted to end things. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, she let out a chilling laugh. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she said, her voice low and menacing. "You don't know what I'm capable of." I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm not finished with you yet," she hissed. "You're mine now, and I don't share." She loosened her grip on my arm, and I yanked my arm away and stood up quickly to get away from her. I managed to break free and quickly exited the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I ran all the way to my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I got inside, I called the police again and reported what had happened. This time, they took me seriously. They sent a patrol car to my apartment and advised me to stay inside and not answer the door for anyone. They said they would investigate and try to locate Sarah. I spent the rest of the day in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every sound. The police called me the next day and told me they had located Sarah. She was being held for questioning. They also told me something that made my blood run cold. Sarah's real name wasn't Sarah. It was Emily. And she had a history of stalking and harassing her previous partners. She was mentally ill and had not been taking her medication. They showed me a picture of the real Sarah, the woman whose identity Emily had stolen. She was a missing person, and the police suspected that Emily had something to do with her disappearance. I was horrified. The woman I had fallen for was a complete fabrication, a dangerous and delusional person who was capable of anything. I spent the next few weeks working with the police, providing them with information about Emily and her activities. Emily was eventually charged with stalking, harassment, and identity theft. She was also the main suspect in Sarah's disappearance. The real Sarah was never found. I learned to keep my guard up more. I never heard from Emily again, but the experience left a lasting scar. I became withdrawn and distrustful, hesitant to form new relationships. It took me a long time to feel safe again, to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The whole thing was a stark reminder of the dangers of online dating, of the anonymity and deception that can lurk behind a carefully curated profile. It taught me to be more cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the red flags, no matter how charming the person may seem. And it all started like any other conversation on Hinge. A simple swipe, a witty message, a seemingly harmless connection that spiraled into a terrifying nightmare. A nightmare that I still struggle to wake up from. The worst part is when I got Hinge again, I saw her on it. So I unmatched and reported her. I never wanted to see her face again. I always look over my shoulder to this day. You never know who is catfishing or lying. It isn't always about money. It could be for something far worse. Okay, so I am usually not one to put my life out there on the internet. But this story, this whole thing that happened to me last year, I feel like I need to share it. Maybe it'll help someone else. Maybe it'll just get it off my chest. Either way, here goes. It all started, predictably, on Hinge. I was in a dating rut, same old boring dates, same recycled conversations. I was starting to think I was destined to be single forever. Then I saw Liam's profile. He was different. Not in a quirky, attention-seeking way, but genuinely interesting. His pictures weren't the typical gym selfies or posed vacation shots. They were candid, showing him laughing with friends, hiking in the mountains, working on some kind of art project. His prompts were thoughtful and witty, not just the usual surface-level stuff. He seemed like a real person, someone who actually had depth and interests beyond getting laid. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily from the start. He was smart, funny, and genuinely curious about me. We talked about everything, our families, our passions, our fears. He seemed to really listen when I spoke, not just waiting for his turn to talk. After a few days of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested this little coffee shop near my apartment, a place I'd always wanted to try. I was excited, maybe a little too excited. I had this feeling, this weird sense of anticipation, like something big was about to happen. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. I am not usually one to get swept away by emotions, but Liam just had this aura about him. Anyway, I got to the coffee shop a few minutes early, and he was already there, waiting for me. And he was even more attractive in person. He had these piercing blue eyes and a warm, genuine smile. He was dressed casually, but with a certain effortless style. He just radiated confidence and charm. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, laughing, sharing stories, and just generally hitting it off. He was so easy to talk to, so engaging, so perfect. He even paid for my coffee, which is a small thing, but it showed he was thoughtful and considerate. As the date was winding down, he walked me back to my apartment. We stood outside for a few minutes, just talking, and then he leaned in and kissed me. It was one of those movie-worthy kisses, the kind that makes your knees weak and your head spin. I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dates turned into sleepovers. Sleepovers turned into spending almost every night together. He was always so attentive, so caring, so understanding. He cooked me dinner. He gave me massages. He listened to me vent about my stressful job. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. My friends loved him. My family loved him. He was charming and charismatic, and he just seemed to fit into my life seamlessly. But then, a few weeks into the relationship, I started noticing little things. small inconsistencies in his stories, things that didn't quite add up. He'd tell me about his childhood, and then contradict himself later on. He'd mention people I'd never heard of, but then brush it off like I should know them. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it started to make me uneasy. And then there was the phone thing. He was incredibly secretive about his phone. He always kept it on silent, always kept it face down, and always took it with him, even to the bathroom. If I even glanced at it, he'd get defensive and change the subject. It was weird, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a private person. Maybe he had a sensitive job. But my gut was telling me something else. I started to feel like I didn't really know him, like he was hiding something from me. And that feeling grew stronger with each passing day. One night, I was at his apartment, waiting for him to come home from work. I was bored, so I started browsing through his bookshelf. It was filled with all sorts of interesting books, philosophy, art, history. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tucked away on the bottom shelf, hidden behind a stack of textbooks, was a small, leather-bound journal. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out. It was locked. I hesitated for a moment, feeling like I was crossing a line, but my gut was screaming at me, telling me I needed to know what was inside. I found a paperclip and, after a few minutes of fiddling, managed to pick the lock. I opened the journal and started reading. What I found inside was horrifying. It was a detailed account of his past relationships, but not in a loving, nostalgic way. It was a chronicle of manipulation, control, and abuse. He described how he had systematically gaslighted his previous girlfriends, how he had isolated them from their friends and families, how he had broken them down emotionally and mentally. It was chilling, disturbing, and utterly terrifying. I realized then that Liam wasn't who he said he was. He was a master manipulator, a predator who preyed on vulnerable women. I was just another target, another name in his twisted game. I slammed the journal shut, my hands shaking. I felt sick to my stomach, betrayed, and utterly terrified. I knew I had to get out of there, and I had to get out now. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the apartment, not even bothering to leave a note. I didn't stop running until I was back in my own apartment, safe and sound. I locked the door, bolted the windows, and curled up in a ball on my bed, sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't believe I had been so blind, so naive. How could I have fallen for his lies? How could I have ignored the red flags? I spent the next few days in a state of panic, afraid that he would come after me. I changed my locks, blocked his number, and deactivated my social media accounts. I told my friends and family what had happened, and they were all incredibly supportive. They helped me file a police report, and they encouraged me to seek therapy. It took me a long time to recover from that experience. I had to rebuild my self-esteem, learn to trust my instincts, and confront the trauma of being manipulated and deceived. But I came out stronger on the other side. I learned that it's okay to trust your gut, even if it doesn't make sense logically. I learned that red flags are red flags for a reason, and you shouldn't ignore them just because you want something to work. And I learned that it's better to be alone than to be with someone who is toxic and dangerous. So, that's my Hinge horror story. It's a reminder that not everyone is who they seem online, and it's important to be cautious and aware when dating. But most importantly, it's a reminder to always trust your gut, because sometimes your intuition knows things that your brain doesn't. I can give a description of what he looked like, but it's important to trust your gut. This story is to demonstrate it. You should always trust your gut. I still can't wrap my head around this whole thing, Like, I'm sitting here months later, and it still feels like some messed up dream I can't shake off. It all started with Hinge. Predictable, right? I mean, everyone's on the apps these days, swiping and hoping for something real. I was no different. I'd been single for a while, tired of the bar scene, and honestly just wanted to find someone cool to share life with. Hinge felt a bit more curated than Tinder, a little less hookup-oriented. So I dove in. My profile was pretty standard. A few decent photos, a witty bio about my love for hiking and bad puns, and the usual prompts. I swiped, matched, and had some okay conversations, but nothing really clicked, until I matched with Alex. Alex's profile was intriguing. His photos were moody and artistic, mostly black and white shots of him in nature. He had this intense gaze that just drew you in. His prompts were thoughtful and a little mysterious, talking about his passion for philosophy and his desire to connect with someone on a deeper level. It felt different. Not like the usual surface-level stuff you see on these apps. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly insightful. He asked questions that actually made me think, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything: our dreams, our fears, our favorite books, our views on life. It felt like I'd known him forever. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested this little hole-in-the-wall coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and a chill, bohemian vibe. I was nervous, but also excited. I had a good feeling about this. When I saw him walk in, I was even more smitten. He was just as handsome in person as he was in his photos, maybe even more so. He had this quiet confidence about him, a way of carrying himself that just commanded attention. We hugged, and the air crackled with an undeniable chemistry. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He was even more engaging in person, with a charming smile and a knack for making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We discovered we had so much in common, from our love of obscure indie bands to our shared passion for environmental activism. As the night wore on, I felt like I was falling hard. This was it, I thought. This was the guy I'd been waiting for. We ended the date with a lingering kiss outside my apartment. It was electric, the kind of kiss that makes your knees weak and your heart skip a beat. I went inside, giddy and hopeful, already picturing our future together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates almost every night, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and just spending time together. We talked on the phone for hours, falling asleep to the sound of each other's voices. I was head over heels. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He'd get these strange, faraway looks in his eyes, like he was lost in thought. He'd become distant and withdrawn, shutting me out without explanation. He'd cancel plans last minute, claiming he had a family emergency, or that he was feeling under the weather. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone has their off days, right? But the behavior persisted, becoming more frequent and more erratic. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells around him, afraid of saying or doing anything that might trigger his mood swings. Then, there were the secrets. He became increasingly secretive about his life, dodging questions about his job, his friends, and his family. He refused to let me come over to his apartment, always making excuses about it being too messy or under construction. I started to get suspicious. What was he hiding? Why was he being so secretive? Was he seeing someone else? I confronted him about it, trying to be gentle and understanding, but he just got defensive, accusing me of being jealous and insecure. He told me I was overreacting and that I needed to trust him. I wanted to believe him, but something just didn't feel right. My gut was telling me that something was terribly wrong. One night, I decided to do some digging. I know it sounds crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. I started by searching his name online, hoping to find some clues about his life. And that's when I stumbled upon it. A news article. A story about a man named Alex, who had been arrested for fraud and embezzlement. The article included a photo of him, and it was him. My Alex. My heart sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The secrets, the lies, the erratic behavior. He was a con artist. I felt betrayed and violated. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have fallen for his lies? I confronted him again, this time armed with the truth. I showed him the news article, and he couldn't deny it. He broke down, begging me to forgive him. He told me he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt me, that he had fallen in love with me. I didn't believe him. I told him to get out of my life and never contact me again. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media, and tried to move on. But the damage was done. I was heartbroken and disillusioned. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets so much worse. A few weeks later, I started getting strange phone calls. Anonymous calls, where the person on the other end would just breathe heavily and then hang up. At first, I ignored them, figuring it was just a wrong number. But the calls persisted, becoming more frequent and more disturbing. Sometimes, the caller would leave a message, a whispered threat, or a disturbing taunt. They knew my name, my address, my routine. They were watching me. I was terrified. I changed my number, but the calls kept coming. They were always one step ahead of me. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything. They said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue the case. I felt like I was trapped in a horror movie. I was being stalked, terrorized, and I had no idea who was behind it. Then, one night, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I opened it cautiously, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed. I screamed. I knew it was him. Alex. He was stalking me, watching me, and he was getting closer. I packed my bags and left town that night. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just disappeared. I've been living in hiding ever since, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what might happen next. I changed my name, my appearance, my entire life. I'm a different person now, a shadow of my former self. I'll never trust anyone again. I'll never use dating apps again. I'm done with love, with relationships, with anything that might put me at risk. He ruined my life. He took everything from me. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to recover. The worst part is, I still don't know why he did it. Was it just for the thrill of the con? Was it because he was a psychopath? Or was it something else? Something even more sinister? I may never know the answer. But I'll never forget the night I swiped right on Alex on Hinge. It was the beginning of my nightmare. I still can't believe this actually happened. I hope this story can make people think twice and be careful about who they talk to online and who they meet up with.